Live only on DAZN. He silenced Britain's best. Usyk, the Brit breaker, but now the dynamite is ready to explode. One night, one shot, and undisputed. Usyk versus Dubois 2. July 19th. Right now at DAZN.com/boxing.
Alright, so Oleksandr Usyk released a pic of himself on his Instagram account. And listen, Oleksandr Usyk is always in shape. In fact, it's very, I don't think I've ever seen Usyk looking remotely out of shape. Some would argue, and maybe the Ring Magazine award show, he maybe looked a little bit, not out of shape is the wrong word, but a little bit heavier in the face than we're used to seeing him. But still, I still think he always looks in pretty good shape, and this is no different. People always speculate about Oleksandr Usyk and say, is he going to come in heavy for this fight? How much is he going to weigh? This, that, and the third. At the end of the day, I've said about Oleksandr Usyk, more often than not, he looks the same as always. And if you look at his run, certainly at heavyweight, he has found the correct weight for himself. But interestingly, I want to talk in this about kind of both guys' weights. I think it's going to be pretty much the same with Oleksandr Usyk, but it's going to be interesting looking at Dubois, because the clips I've seen of him, he looks quite sharp. He looks in very good shape. He's always in very good shape, Daniel Dubois, likewise. But I think that how much he weighs could play a big factor in this fight. Let's have a little talk about it. In fact, actually, let's just look at Oleksandr Usyk's weight, because I'm going to show you a little bit of footage from the first Oleksandr Usyk Daniel Dubois fight, and I'm going to be using this in a film study that I'm hopefully going to get out for you guys later on this evening. It does have me. It's weird going back and watching Usyk Dubois 1. You forget how good of a performance it was from Oleksandr Usyk. And I mean this, it really genuinely was a very, very good performance. We look at Usyk's weights right here. Made his debut at heavyweight nearly 6 years ago now. Shez Witherspoon 215, 217 against Chisora. And this is when Usyk finds that perfect kind of in-between weight. 221 and a quarter against Anthony Joshua. 221 and a half against Anthony Joshua in the rematch. 221 exactly against Daniel Dubois. 223 and 1/2 pound against Tyson Fury. And he was a career heavy his last time around, 226. Having said that, he had clothes on in that weigh-in. So he wasn't as... Now, Fury was 281, but he had a big, huge leather biker jacket on. They weigh a ton as it is. So that weight of 281 for Fury is not 100% accurate. But Usyk was, I want to say, roughly about 223 as well in that fight, because again, the clothes he had on, you can knock a bit off for that respective weight. But Dubois is an interesting one. So Daniel Dubois, throughout the course of his career, if you look early on in his career, he was in the low 230s. He was 231 on his pro debut. Got up as high as 239 against Dorian Darch. And he stayed roughly in the 230s pretty much throughout the course of everything. Was in the low 240s. When I say the low 240s, 240 against Ebenezer Tete, 240 against Kujimoto, 244 against Ricardo Snyder. Do you remember that was in the BT studio in Stratford? Didn't realise the BT studio was in Stratford. It's interesting. You learn something new every day. So it's near me. Oh, I don't know where it is in Stratford. 244 against Joe Joyce, 240 against Bogdan Dinu, 238 against Joe Casimino, 241 against Trevor Bryan, 240 against Kevin Lorena. Now here's the interesting bit, right? Bear in mind the weights I just read out there. Low 230s into the low 240s, never any higher. Against Oleksandr Usyk nearly 2 years ago now, and have a look on screen at that, right? That is Daniel Dubois in the first round against Oleksandr Usyk, taking a big, stiff, hard right jab, which would ultimately spell, you're talking about a guy who was really 12 pounds heavier, but he looked significantly slower. And that was against Oleksandr Usyk. He was slightly heavier against Jarrell Miller, 239. And now lately, his last two respective fights, we've seen Daniel Dubois in 245 against Hrgovic, 248 against Anthony Joshua. In those respective fights, again, he's not the quickest heavyweight in the world, but his output was quite good. His movement, which has never been great, the way his biomechanics are, he's not going to be someone who's going to be able to slip shots, left, right, and centre. But certainly at that higher weight, you saw it in the Hrgovic fight, he was constantly off balance when he was trying to, move a little bit. Against AJ, it really counted for... Well, he really ragdolled AJ, to be honest with you, in that fight. We all know what happened there. But it has me wondering, what's he going to weigh for this fight against Oleksandr Usyk. He's tried the light in the past, as in like he's been in the low 230s. Didn't work against Oleksandr Usyk. I'll talk more about that in the what went wrong, because I don't think the weight had any impact in his performance against Oleksandr Usyk. Maybe he was too light or anything like that. I don't think it was any of that. When you go back and watch it, you're like, oh my God. Oleksandr Usyk was on form that night, and made all the more impressive considering the fact that the ring was slightly damp because it was raining like hell in Poland that night, and Oleksandr Usyk still looked really quick and really on it, and Dubois just didn't. His punch output dropped dramatically. A lot went wrong that night, which we'll talk about later. But I do find it interesting, the weights, how Dubois' form, as the weight's gone up, his form has improved. But saying that, you know, would that really be wise to come in that heavy against Oleksandr Usyk? And here's an interesting one. Anthony Joshua, right? So Anthony Joshua, when he fought Andy Ruiz, that's the first time in a long time he was back in the 230s, right? He was 237 against Andy Ruiz. And then he stayed in the 240s. 240 against Usyk, he was 244 in the rematch. And he looked good. Well, he always looks good aesthetically in both fights. But they are lightweights for Anthony Joshua by his standards. And what did he do as soon as he lost those Usyk fights? He started packing the weight on and then coming into the 250s. 255 against Franklin, 250 against Hellenius, 51 against Otto Wallin, 252 against Ngannou, same against Dubois. Did that really help him? No, it was actually more of a hindrance. So the weight thing could be interesting. I mean, Anthony Joshua fighting Usyk at a lighter weight by his standards, it actually benefited him in a way. He didn't win the fight. He wasn't in with a shout of winning either fight. But I think it could have been a lot worse for Anthony Joshua if he'd have been the 255 he was against Jermaine Franklin, the 252 he was against Daniel Dubois, slower, more stationary. Against Oleksandr Usyk, yes, you can use that size to your advantage. It's a big risk. And people talk about Dubois imposing himself on Oleksandr Usyk. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a later video this evening, but it's an interesting one. So those are my thoughts. The two weights for both guys. It's going to be an interesting one to see what Dubois comes in at, because the weight could be a key factor for Dubois in winning this fight. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, people, if you could, smash the like button, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. Until next time, peace.